Warning: the content of this video is not necessarily designed to apply to people in abusive relationships. So if you think you might be in an abusive relationship, I want you to be very careful, very discerning about how to apply what I say in this video. Now let's get to the video. There is pretty much nothing more confusing, lonely, and maddening than a marriage that is not working. How is it even possible that the person who you were so excited to marry is now such a jerk? Unfortunately, you are not alone. And as a husband who definitely was a jerk for a long time and still can be from time to time, but now has a marriage and a family that both me and my wife love and are really proud of, I want to encourage you with the story of how my wife saved our marriage. I want to look at one important decision among many that my wife made when I was being a real jerk to her, and ask you how you can also make that decision to help your marriage. So to set this up a bit, my wife and I had just gotten married, and our expectations of marriage were more off than your average birth plan. You ladies know what I'm talking about. How accurate was your birth plan really? You can let me know in the comments, but ours was off. The important part of the story is that since at the time I was in seminary studying God's mercy and love and grace, obviously I responded to my subverted expectations with anger, lectures, and guilt sessions. Because if the gospel teaches us anything, it's that guilt and shame are a great way to seek change. My wife spent years under the disappointment and the pressure of being a disappointment that can crush a person. I was being a real jerk of a husband, and she almost left a number of times. What made her stay was a phone call with her mom. As she was talking with her mom, complaining about being married to me, her mom said an important thing: "You just have to love him." Now, I think that most of us would get instantly angry at our mom for not being understanding, not empathizing enough, for not seeing our point of view. But Sandy was wise enough to take that simple encouragement from her mom and make the marriage-saving decision to love me, to be for me when I was being a jerk. Now, before you think that is simplistic, let me break down why there is such power in that decision. The most important reason that there is power in loving someone when they're being a jerk is because that is how Jesus loved us. Romans 5:10 says that while we were enemies with God, we were reconciled to God by Jesus' death. While we were Jesus' enemy, Jesus loved us and died for us. When you choose to really love your husband, even when he feels like your enemy, you are being like Jesus. There is a ton of power in that. There's a ton of reconciliation. There is resurrection power in that. If Jesus can raise the dead, then you choosing to love your husband can raise your marriage. And think about the love you received from Christ. Do you take that love and continue to be an enemy of Christ? No. When you receive Christ's love, you want to love Christ for loving you. Do you see what happened? You were an enemy of Christ. Then Christ loved you and died for you. Then you wanted to give love to Christ. Often what we want in a struggling marriage is to wait for the other person to love us before we love them. If Christ has waited for us to love him before he loved us, he would never have come to rescue us. But instead, he loved us, and he died for us, and that formed in us the desire to love him. When my wife decided in her heart to love me, even when I was being a jerk, it had the same effect on me. I wanted to love her. I became convinced that, oh, she does actually want to be on the same team as me, which is something that I was really doubting at that time. Maybe you're thinking, I have tried that. I have tried to love him and be for him, and it did not work. Unfortunately, you're not alone in that either. But I want you to think about one image from Revelation 3. It's where Jesus is standing at the door of the church in Laodicea and knocking. 2 thoughts. That is what Jesus' pursuit of you was like. He stood at the door of your heart and knocked and knocked and knocked until you opened. He showed you incredible faithfulness and long-suffering. That's how Jesus showed love to you. That's how he calls us to love others. But, secondly, if you're choosing to love your husband to get something out of them, then that's not the place you want to be. Choosing to love your husband is not magic, and it doesn't guarantee he will choose to love you back. And I am not at all negating your husband's responsibility to love you like Jesus loves you. The fact that I was not loving Sandy was a tragedy. And it's a tragedy that your husband is being a jerk to you. But you can't control that. In order to love like Jesus, you would choose to love him because loving him is what Jesus would do, not to get him to love you. Our marriage really turned around, but it all started with Sandy's decision to choose to love like Jesus and to love like how Jesus loved her. And eventually we both grew and became more loving spouses. And our marriage was saved to the place that now we are super in love with each other and proud of the family that we're building. So here's my question for you. How have you been waiting for your husband to love you before you choose to love him? What would it mean for you to love him, serve him, and be for him even if he feels like your enemy, even when he's a jerk? Now, there was another part of our journey to a better marriage that involved learning how to talk to each other. And if you think that would be helpful, then I have a gift that I want to give you. It's a free guide that I put together on communicating in marriage. It's called Communicate Better, Be Happy Together. You can go to my website, there's a link in the description, download that video, watch it, use it, and communicate with your spouse better so that you can have a thriving marriage. So I'm excited about that video. I want you to go watch it and let me know what you think. And we'll talk to you again in another video.